Today on Eye on Northwest Politics.
The choices we make as leaders will have a ripple effect on generations to come.
Critical issues facing Oregon lawmakers as they return to Salem this week for the 83rd legislative session. I sit down with the top leaders in the House and the Senate to discuss priorities and the challenges ahead. Plus, possible big changes to how Metro uses its supportive housing services tax for the region's housing crisis. Metro Council President Lynn Peterson joins me to discuss the changes and how it could affect you if you have to pay that tax. And
I hope to inspire children across Oregon.
Rosie's new role. The state's newest kid governor gets ready to take the reins and to take on a major issue in the state. Eye on Northwest Politics starts now. Thanks for joining us. This is Eye on Northwest Politics. I'm Ken Body. Let's get right to your top political headlines. Portland police are gearing up, preparing for any possible violence on Inauguration Day. Portland Police Chief Bob Day says they are monitoring some planned events like protests and demonstrations, and they'll have an increased presence throughout this holiday weekend. We did see some unrest in 2017 when thousands of protesters marched through downtown Portland. Police used tear gas when they say some of those protesters threw objects at police officers. A former candidate for Washington's 3rd Congressional District is reportedly being considered to helm the nation's counterterrorism center. Politico reports that Republican Joe Kent has already been working in the office of the Director of National Intelligence. In a debate in the Coin 6 studios back in October, Kent affirmed his support for a number of Trump policies, including building a wall to stop the flow of illegal immigrants into the U.S. The Portland Rose Festival facing more than $1 million shortfall from last year's event. Despite that, organizers are still determined to make it happen. They've been cutting costs in all kinds of ways, like getting more volunteers and reducing payroll. They are sticking to their plan to keep the festival going this summer. The 83rd Oregon legislature gets to work this coming Tuesday, and there's a lot on the table for the legislature to consider. From dealing with the state's homeless and housing issues to the effects of climate change to mental health. Democrats control both houses of the state legislature, and that's why my guests today are both Democrats. Senate Majority Leader Kayse Jama of East Portland, including Damascus and Boring, and House Majority Leader Ben Bowman, representing parts of Beaverton, Tigard and Metsger. Gentlemen, welcome to Eye on Northwest Politics.
Thank you, Ken. Really appreciate you having us.
It's a pleasure to be here.
Well, this is the long session that goes until June. How many bills do you expect the legislature to consider during this time?
It's a good question. Last long session in 2023, we saw a few thousand bills. In the end, about 650 passed, and something that might be surprising to some of your viewers, 95% of them were bipartisan, with at least some Republicans and at least some Democrats supporting them. So I anticipate we'll have about the same number this session.
How do you get through thousands of bills and decide which ones get to the floor?
I think it's just that we have a process of course, going through the committee and make sure we kind of go through that process. And so the goal really is to ensure that committee chairs have what they need, the support that they need to make sure that they are able to do their work. And through that process, we'll make sure that we, go from the committee to the core areas of the issues that we want to work on it. So the really is that what I'm emphasizing about the process itself.
Let's talk about some of the issues you will be considering. At Monday's State of the State address, Governor Kotek made it clear that housing is her top priority. Listen to what she had to say.
I am impatient about the pace of progress, and some days just pretty angry that we're in this predicament at all, and that we can't move faster to get more housing built. So please, my friends, let's do more, let's be bolder, let's build more housing. March of climate change.
The governor is supporting House Bill 2138, which would expand where housing can be built. What do you see as that bill's chances, and what other bills related to this issue do you expect to deal with in the legislative session?
Well, the governor's exactly right. We need to build more housing. The number one thing that we heard from voters during the campaign season was that housing is really expensive. Whether they're trying to afford their rent or trying to buy a house for the first time, it's out of reach for a lot of people in this state. And the most effective thing we can do to bring down the cost of housing is to produce more housing. Senator Jama actually was a former chair of the Senate Housing Committee, so he's an expert on this topic.
Thank you. I think the question for us is that, this issue of housing crisis that we're facing has been ongoing for a long time. And we want to make sure that we address, and we've been addressing for a long time, since I came to the Senate 4 years ago. The way I describe the crisis that we're facing is that 4 areas. One, when folks how do we make sure that folks don't become homeless and we add more numbers to our homeless in the streets and in our community? So that's the goal one. Then goal two is how do we address when people become homeless? So that means building more shelters, make sure that people have a place to sleep at night. As goal three is then housing production, and housing production, again, housing production. Through that process, of course, we want to make sure that we build enough houses to house all Oregonians. So the goal is really this coming session, is just really doubling down on that scenario about making sure that we have the resources to build more housing, but also support people when they are struggling and make sure that they have shelters that they can sleep at night when weather is cold or hot or in between. So making sure folks have a place to sleep at night is important, but I think ultimately moving from that to having them to permanent housing, moving them to permanent housing is really the key. So that's really the process that we're continuously want to invest those areas that I mentioned.
Let's talk about some of the other priorities. I've heard that transportation will be high on the list of things that the legislature will be dealing with. What aspects of transportation and what are you looking at? What do you expect to come across your desks?
Yeah, this is a huge issue in the 2025 session. So if you think about the challenges facing our transportation system, we've got potholes, we've got congestion, we've got people who are paying more for the wear and tear on their vehicles because of poor road surface conditions. We've got a lot of parts of this state who don't have sidewalks or crosswalks. These are all problems throughout our system that the transportation package is designed to address. We need to right-size the agency so that we have the resources to maintain the assets that we have, so that everybody feels safe using our transportation system in the state.
How much is the transportation package?
Well, that's what the session's going to be for. The Joint Committee on Transportation did a statewide tour. They visited 12 different parts of the state and heard from Oregonians of all different types who use all different types of transportation to gather information about what the needs are. And now the work is, how do we design the package? How much money are we going to need for the package? What are the revenue sources going to be? And how do we right-size it so that it's affordable and effective in building an effective transportation system?
I understand that school funding, mental health, those are some of the other issues that you'll be dealing with in the legislature this session. First, with school funding, are we going to see more money put into the school system as the governor is asking?
I think our schools, as you know, that has been underfunded for a long time. And the goal really is I think the governor's budget has about additional resources, I think about $600 million of additional resources. The important thing is that we want to make sure that we support the school districts and get their resources as much as we can. But more importantly, how do we hold them accountable to ensure that the students get what they need, but make sure that the students' graduation rates being increased. So there has to be some accountability while we're also funding more resources into the school system. That's really both of them are important elements of the work.
Mm-hmm. And the other issue that I mentioned, mental health services. Mm-hmm. How much of a priority will that be, and how will it tie into what you're doing with housing?
It's a significant priority for us in the legislature. In the short session last year, we passed House Bill 4002, which some of your viewers might remember, was about the addiction crisis that we're facing and making sure people who are struggling with addiction can access treatment. That law has now is beginning to be implemented across the state, and we're seeing really promising signs. But we need to expand access. There are still a lot of people in this state who don't have access to behavioral health and mental health supports. So that will be a focus of the legislature, is expanding access to all the people who need it, so that they can get their lives on the right track.
We had State Treasurer Elizabeth Steiner on the program last week, and she says the state is moving towards more clean energy investments for the future. What do you expect the legislature to do in terms of climate change and clean energy?
I think climate change is real, and it's on us right now. As you know, that we have done a lot of work in this area for the last few sessions. We want to continue to double down on those issues, and particularly around how do we make sure that we protect Oregonians from wildfire. As you see, California is what's happening, sad thing that happened in California. But I think Oregon also has faced this wildfire for the last decade or so. So the goal really, how do we make sure that we have resources to support the firefighters, and so ensuring that there has to be mechanism to support the firefighters, but also ensuring that the climate change is dealt with effectively. So we're going to continue to work on this coming session and climate change issues.
Ken, if I can add to that, we just had the largest wildfire season in Oregon history, both by acreage and by cost. And I don't think that's going to be an anomaly. Climate change is here in this state, so the challenge for us as a legislature is to make sure the state has the resources to respond to those wildfires year after year. At the same time, to your question, there is a really great opportunity in climate change for Oregon. Billions of dollars are going to be made in clean energy, and a lot of jobs are going to be created in these industries: solar, wind, tidal energy. Oregon has long been a leading state on environmental policy, and there's a huge opportunity for us to continue to be a leader on those issues and create those jobs in Oregon.
Democrats hold supermajorities in both houses of the legislature this year, which means you can pass legislation without Republican support. The Republican leadership is saying basically that means that the status quo is going to be maintained. Here's what House and Senate Minority Leaders Christine Drazan and Daniel Bonham said last week.
Oregonians deserve better than the state government they've been getting.
The one thing we can promise you is Republicans are coming to Salem to fight.
Republicans are here to stand up.
It's worth noting that Senator Bonham is one of those senators, the 10 senators who walked out in 2023, brought the legislative process to a halt for more than a month. How concerned are you about Republican challenges to your agenda in the legislature?
I think, as my colleague said earlier, that 90% of the bills that we pass is actually bipartisan support. But the more important thing is that we, as Democrats, are ready to work. But more importantly, also, we want to collaborate and partner with our Republican colleagues. I think there is a really genuine interest of our both parties to ensure that we're collaborating and working together. Oregonians want us to work together. Oregonians want us to be in partnership with each other. Oregonians, regardless of where they live, see results in their legislators that affects their lives, whether it's economic opportunities, whether it's housing, whether it's transportation. They want our leaders to work together, and that's what we are intended to do it.
I think that's exactly right. You're going to see from Democratic leadership the desire to collaborate and work together. We did pick up seats in the Senate and in the House, but our approach and our priorities are not changed by that. We're going to work with everybody who's willing to collaborate to solve the biggest problems that the state is facing, because that's what we're charged with by the voters who elected us.
Thank you very much, gentlemen, for being on Eye on Northwest Politics. We look forward to covering the session.
Thanks for the opportunity.
Thank you so much for the opportunity.
Next, Metro is often overlooked when we talk solutions to the area's housing crisis, but the regional government plays a critical role through its supportive housing services tax. Metro is considering major changes to that tax, to that program, and that could change the game in building more housing. We talk about those proposed changes with Metro Council President Lynn Peterson next on Eye on Northwest Politics.